Hi there, Lindsay here. Today for Sketchbook Sunday, we are going to sketch this cathedral with oil paints and really look at values. This video is brought to you by jerrysartorama.com. I'll be using their Berlin line of water mixable oil paints since I'm painting upstairs in the shared space. And I'm going to start off actually by sketching with an oil-based marker. And the reason I'm sketching with an oil-based marker rather than an oil pastel, which is what I usually use, is because I'm doing architecture today and I'm really not that practiced in doing architecture. I tend to prefer more organic shapes, and so I know that was going to be a challenge for me, and I wanted to make sure that I wasn't just going to smush out my lines as I worked, and also I wanted to make sure that anything I sketched out wasn't going to get smudged out into the sky, because oil pastels are great, especially for doing organic things, because your oil pastel marks just turn into your paint as you paint over them. But I didn't want this to happen with this architecture because for one, I'd lose my sketch too soon and I really need to rely on my sketch. And for the other thing, I didn't want to get that smudge into my sky. So I'm just using a black oil-based marker. This is one of the PBO4 artist markers. There are lots of different brands of oil-based markers. The neat thing about the oil-based markers versus oil paints is that they dry almost immediately. So you'll be able to work over them without any worries of reconstituting them. So in order to draw something that's pretty symmetrical, I flip my canvas around and I'll look at it from different sides just to try to keep things like a mirror image of one another. I'll share the reference photo that I used for this so that you can sketch from that, or you could even trace the photo if you wanted to, which would probably be a great place to start if you want to concentrate on values and not have to worry about your drawing too much. But I enjoy drawing, and this is definitely a challenge, and I like to challenge myself, especially if it's something I'm not very good at, because I think it's good to work on those things you're not good at. That's how you become better, and that's how you grow, and that's how you learn. And if you keep doing stuff where you know you're good at it and you get predictable results, then you don't really grow and you can get burned out. Burned out is awful. It's awful to be burned out when you're an artist. I placed my field easel, my Sketchbox French easel, on my drafting table here so I could tip the canvas at different angles. So I'd still be able to film, but I could either stand or sit on my stool and be really comfortable when I was working. This took about almost 2 hours. So I was spending some time on this, and you want to make sure you're comfortable. Otherwise you'll get that kind of pinch between your shoulder blades, and that's no fun. You don't want to suffer for your art physically, maybe mentally, but not physically. I also want to let you know that the real-time version of this is will be in Critique Club in a day or two, so members can find that in the curriculum. If you're not a member and want to be, I'll put information in the video description on how you can join. It's $5 a month, and it allows you to upload your original artworks for critique, and also it gives you 2 brand new real-time tutorials every month, and you have access to all the past ones too, which is nice. It gives you something to do, and it's a little bit more advanced tutorials that go in a little more in depth. Like this one is 2 hours of values, talking about values pretty much. So I aim to really help those that want that longer form teaching that's at a little more advanced level that just doesn't do very well on YouTube. So information on that is in the description if you're interested. So I started off with the sky. I used cerulean blue, and then I went in with some white and added some clouds and added a little alizarin crimson plus white, and go real easy on that alizarin crimson because it's super strong. And this is a alizarin crimson hue, so it will not fade. You really have to pay attention to that with watercolors, not so much in oils because the oil binders are a lot more protective of the pigments than like gummy Arabic in watercolors. But still, it's good to know that when you're choosing colors that you get something that's going to last. You don't want your work to fade. And I'm just kind of fiddling with the sky, layering it up, and I wanted a nice blended look. Now this is a weird canvas. I've kind of been on a mission this month to do 20 small oil paintings and use up some supplies that I've had kicking around. I've been using traditional oils because I have a lot from back when I used to teach a couple oil painting classes every week. So I was using that for the most part, but I use the water mixables today because I'm upstairs and I don't want to have solvents around my family and my pets. But this canvas was kind of strange. It was just, I just threw it in my canvas panel bin. And I don't really know the origin of this canvas panel, and it was sucking up the oil. It was very strange. Stuff was drying like almost immediately. So if you want to do this in acrylics or gouache, go ahead. The process is going to be the same because you notice I'm not doing a lot of blending here. Definitely the amount of blending I'm doing, you can achieve that with acrylics. So my first layer here on the cathedral itself is going in with my darkest values. And you could use black and white, and I so go ahead and do that if the colors are confusing, but I really love color. And so I'm mixing a variety of neutrals and also keeping some bright colors. And I'm using a mixture of ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson for my darks, and I'm putting that in everywhere. That big arch that you see in the center, that is a stained glass window. And as I, work through the painting and I start working up to the middles and the highlights, you'll see the leading that I'll put in. Since it's the outside of the cathedral, you don't see the bright glass like you would if you were inside a church, but it definitely gives the impression, and that's what I'm going for here, a very impressionistic, colorful version of this stone church. And I'd like to start when I'm doing oils, and honestly, I don't think there's a medium that I don't like to start with my shadows. I might build it up if I have a really, really accurate sketch in watercolor and it's like a botanical, I might go light to dark, but I usually, one of those first layers, am getting my darkest values in somewhere, so I have that scale to work from. I find that if I get my darkest values in first, I'm much braver and I work much faster throughout the painting because I am not fussing and hemming and hawing over how dark something should be. Get those darks in first and commit to them, and that's going to make your process go a lot faster. And also, if you mess up on your shadows, which is where people tend to mess up, you've messed up at the beginning and not at the end after you've put a couple hours into a painting. So now I'm on the mid-tone layers here. I am putting in the door, which is kind of like a varnished wood. So I'm using yellow ochre and burnt umber for that. And I've put a little bit of, kind of dragged my brush in some areas where I might want some like water spotting or rust on the bricks. Sometimes old bricks will have that, or old stones will have that little bit of variation from minerals and iron and stuff, and I wanted to get that in there. I am using some blues for some of my midtones here because, like I mentioned, I wanted my stones to be colorful, and it's really more important, no matter what you're painting, that your values are right. You can paint a banana purple if you want to. If you have the values right, it's still gonna look like a banana. Same with anything. Your brain can figure it out. Your brain knows what you're painting, and your brain will color correct. It's really strange. How your brain wants to color correct things. But I love to really push the colors. And something you can do if you have a hard time seeing the colors, like maybe you're painting a white flower or something that's gray, like stones and rocks, things like that, and you're having a hard time seeing those undertones of color, if you take a digital photo of it and then you put it in your computer and you increase the saturation, and you can do that right in, like if you have like a PC, you go right in, like click the photo to open it, click edit, and just right in the Windows photo editor that's on every computer, you can go to I think it's called effects, or it's one of those little tabs, and you just turn up the color, and that will boost all of those undertones so you can see what colors are under there. And it's something you can train your eyes to see, I do believe, unless you have some color blindness. I know everybody has a different amount of sensitivity to color, and sometimes if it's a really bright day, things are overexposed, it could be really hard to see that, or if it's really dark, also could be hard to see it. But I'm really pushing the colors here because that's what I like. And you can invent them, you can put them in, as long as you have your values right, you can go crazy with the color, and that's what I really love to do. Architecture generally doesn't inspire me to paint, but when I can get color in there, then that inspires me. So I probably, anytime you've ever seen me do any architecture tutorials on my YouTube channel, it has been like with crazy colors, because I think that's why I like to paint flowers so much, because of the colors. And so now we've gotten our darks, we've gotten our midtones. Now we're going in with our highlights, and not our brightest highlights. We're going in, I would say, the value between midtone and highlight. So it's kind of like light midtone or dark highlight range, I would say. And this is where you start to get volume in your work. So it goes from like a flat abstract painting, which actually looks kind of cool. I think that would be kind of a neat painting just as it is, just as an abstract. But it goes from being a little flatter and more abstract to having depth and volume. And you tend to get your depth with your shadows, you get your volume with your highlights. So keep that in mind. And when you stay in the mid-range, and usually when I see a student's painting that's not working, it's because they have too much, everything's in the mid-range. They've got their colors, wonderful colors, but they don't have the value they need. So your shadows give you depth. Your highlights give you volume, and your midtones also help flesh everything out. But you have to have you've got to have all three in order to have a really rich painting. Even things that don't seem like they have a lot of contrast, you're still going to have some differences. Otherwise, it would just be flat. You know, if it's something that's got volume to it, you're going to have that contrast. The stronger the lighting, the more contrast you're going to get. And, you know, just kind of keep that in mind. And you may choose reference material to work from by how much contrast you have and how many shadows you can see. It's definitely better as a beginner to choose something that has a lot of contrast so that you don't have to think as hard to find your shadows, because learning where to put your shadows, midtones, and highlights is difficult enough when you have a good reference piece. Then, you know, when you're starting out. So just go ahead and do that. Another thing that's really good to do, and you could do this just with stuff around your house, like if you have children's building blocks, you could just make a stack of blocks, just make an interesting still life, put a strong light source on it, maybe drape some fabric behind it. Do it so you can see shadows. You can see really bright highlights that are almost white from where the light's bouncing off it. Then you've got the deeper shadows where hardly any light's getting to it. Make yourself a dynamic still life like that and take a photo of it and work from that. I mean, you could work from the still life, but if you have windows, your light could be changing during the course of your painting. If you take a photo of it, it's not going to change. But even though it may seem a little tedious and boring because it's maybe something you're not very interested in, you will learn a lot from that. And it'll make you a better painter, so that when you do go paint something you're really excited about painting, you're going to have the skills to identify the values and put them in. I find that that step where you're doing the light midtones or dark highlights, whatever you want to call it, I find that to be the most time-consuming portion, because you've got a lot of space you're going to be covering there. You're going to be filling in and filling the canvas. And I think this took a little bit longer just because the canvas was soaking up my paint, it seemed like, and my paint wasn't blending and spreading, so probably would have gone a little faster on one of my other canvas panels that I usually use. But like I mentioned, I just wanted to use it up. I also dabbed a little bit of that leftover color on my brush that had some cerulean blue in it, on the window, because I knew it would be reflecting the light, the sky color, and I wanted to get that in there before I did any of the intricate leading. I didn't get too intricate on this because the canvas was pretty coarse, and it's only a 6" by 9" canvas, so I didn't have a lot of room, and I just knew I wasn't going to be able to get a lot of detail with it. And I wanted to have it more of an impressionistic style anyway. I would use a different medium if I wanted to have something super detailed. Probably I'd use my new colored pencil powder blender stuff, because that would be fun. That would be fun to do that. Maybe I will. Maybe I'll do that in the colored pencil. Let me know in the comments below if you're interested in seeing that. I might just do it and not film it, because that might be boring after seeing this one. I don't know. I try not to be too repetitive on my channel, on my YouTube channel. It probably seems like I'm very repetitive. I find like my cards seem kind of repetitive, but anyway. Okay, so what I'm doing here now is doing my dark details. Okay, so we have done, we did our darks, we did our sketch, we did our dark values, we did our medium values, we did our kind of mid highlights, low and mid highlights, and now I'm doing dark details. Okay, got that straight. Dark details. So small brush, watery paint. Well, you would use like an oil. If I had an oil that was compatible, well, I could have used my regular oil paint oils, like oil mediums. This is where you'd want to get your kind of, you'd want to use like an oily medium to help it flow, help your paint flow a little bit if you have it. If not, use your solvent. For these, it's water, because it's water mixable. I'm not using a lot though. It's not runny, it's just enough to make the paint flow, and I'm going in and putting in those really crisp dark shadows that I see that give detail. Okay, and you want to wait till the end to do this, because otherwise you're just going to wipe it out. I was using a bigger brush, bolder strokes when I did my original dark values. This is dark details, and I do the dark details before the light details, because white oil paint, and it's not so much in here because everything's drying so fast, will gobble up your other colors. So you want to, that's why I always do my light areas last in oil paints. It just, unless you're going to let things dry completely and then go back in, it's a good idea. And I prefer to paint, well, I do like doing paintings with a lot of glazing, but I just don't have, I haven't had that much time to do a lot of layered oil paintings, so I tend to work alla prima like this. So now I'm going to go in with my light details. So these are my brightest highlights. These are where I'm going to be putting in the detail on the window pane. Now I realized just by putting that little white dab in the center that that was way too light, that was not that light of a value. So I had to gray down that highlight, and I did that by adding some of the ultramarine blue and burnt umber mix, because that gave me a really nice gray. And I just kind of started by making a very loose pattern of the medallion in the center, and then the columns. And when I know I need like six little panes on the bottom, I just divide it in half and then divide each half into thirds. So I find that I do that a lot when I'm doing anything symmetrical, because it just is a way that my brain can kind of work around that. And it's just a really easy way to make things symmetrical. Try dividing something in half and then in half again, or in half and in thirds. It just kind of takes what you're looking at out of the equation. It lets you look at it a little more scientifically, and it's just a tool to help you get things a little bit more balanced and placed correctly. So you can see by adding these bright highlights where the light's kind of bouncing off these edges and surfaces, it really defines the shape, and it gives you that that kind of crisp detail that you need. I added some highlights to the door with yellow ochre and white, and I'm just kind of just working my way around any of these little edges that I see are catching a spot of sunlight. I'm adding that in. And when you get those dark details and the light details, that brings everything into focus. So it gives you, so your values, your light and your dark, give you the volume and the depth. And then your high highlight details and your shadow details, your dark details, give you the definition that you need. And so you take all these elements together and you put them together in a painting, and you end up with something that, even though it's not like really detailed, it's very impressionistic, it gives you the illusion of having something fairly detailed. So you got to remember that when somebody's looking at this, they are filling in the details. They are putting in brush strokes where you haven't. So you don't want to spell everything out for somebody. You want to let them have part of the fun in composing the painting too. And that's what Impressionism does, is it gives the viewer an active role in your painting and lets them put it together a bit. And it gives them a new way of looking at something. If I did this exactly the way it looked, well, for one, it would take me probably a week and a lot of patience, but it would take away some of the fun for the viewer, give the viewer something to do. And I think that's why Impressionism became so popular, because it just engages the viewer. And we have cameras to take photographs, and I think photorealism is beautiful, but it's also nice to present an artwork where somebody can put their own impression on it and their own, take it in however it is meaningful to them. So there's my little take on that. So this is pretty much does it. I did wait till the next day to come in and just double check my highlights, see if I want to put any really bright ones in with pretty much just white. And that's what I'm doing here, just adding those little sparkles here and there of the super bright areas. And that's pretty much it. I really like how this came out. It was a lot of fun. And it's always nice to do something that's a little out of your comfort zone. That's what I try to do on Sketchbook Sunday and for Critique Club, because it helps you grow. And if you don't grow, you get burned out, and that is absolutely no fun at all. I want to thank you so much for joining me today. If you want more information about Critique Club, I'll put it in the video description. I'll also put a list of colors I used and reference photos there, so you can paint and draw along too if you want. Thanks for watching. Until next time, happy painting!